On December 7th, 1941, Japan, like its infamous Axis partners, struck first and declared war afterwards. Costly to our Navy was the loss of war vessels, airplanes, and equipment, but more costly to Japan was the effectiveness of its foul attack in immediately unifying America in its determination to fight and win the war thrust upon it, and to win the peace that will follow.
Well, I entered the service in Cleveland, Ohio, and was sent from there to Great Lakes. From Great Lakes, I sent to Seattle, Washington, or Bremerton, where the West Virginia was, and I was assigned to the deck division on the USS West Virginia. And I thought that ship in dry dock, where I had to go underneath the ship and scrape barnacles, and there's wires all over the place. She was being modernized. But I thought that was the dirtiest thing I'd ever seen in my life, you know. After the ship ran through a few trials, we went down to Long Beach. The battleships were stationed on the West Coast at that time. And in the ensuing years, the battleships were stationed at Pearl Harbor. Admiral Richardson wanted the ships on the West Coast. Roosevelt, Frank Knox, and his group of cronies all wanted that ships out at Pearl Harbor. Now, it takes about 3 days for those ships to get back to the West Coast. So there was a reason that those ships were sent to Pearl Harbor. I was really impressed with the Japanese in respect that they're very industrious. By 1905, when Yamamoto was 21 years old, the Japanese had a navy large enough to defeat the Russians at Port Arthur on the Russian East Coast. In that battle, Yamamoto lost his 2 index fingers. He was knocked unconscious and he had some shrapnel in his legs. Yamamoto was miraculous. He was brilliant. He was interested mostly in the oil. Roosevelt enacted what they call an extra embargo act. Japan was buying 80% of their oil from the United States. Japan was devastated. So that may have been a part of the reason they decided to attack the United States, although that's not a really good reason. Prior to that, the Japanese embassy in Tokyo sent a message to all the embassies around the world: east wind, rain. East wind, rain was a code message for all the embassies and consulates throughout the world to shred all incriminating evidence relative to the attack on Pearl Harbor. But on the morning of the attack, 3 of us were assigned to a boat crew. And we were to pick up some officers at the Officers Club landing in Southeast Lock at 8 o'clock. At 7:50, we left the ship, 3 of us. I was a stern hook, Bill Morris the bow hook, Earl Coon was a coxswain. 7:55, we're right in the middle of Southeast Lock. And that was the only place the Japanese could use to launch their torpedoes. We heard a loud explosion on Ford Island. I turned around and heard this loud noise, you know, bomb. And I turned around and saw this Japanese plane that came down. And he peeled sideways, and you see those 2 meatballs on there. So I said, well, this is it. Because we expected war. And turned back around, and we're facing torpedo planes. They're coming right up the channel to where we're both. The Officers Club landing is in Southeast Lock, over pretty close to the sub base. So we're looking at these torpedoes, and Coxswain kept his plane right underneath the Japanese torpedo planes, kept the boat. So the machine gunner behind the Coxswain, the only way he could shoot was out that way. Now, if we'd have cut and run, I wouldn't be here talking to you. Plane after plane after plane. I accounted for about 29 torpedo planes out of the 40 that the Japanese launched that morning. It was in its first attack, no torpedo planes in the second attack. So we got to a point where we were ready to, pretty close to where we were going to turn into the Officers Club landing. And two men, Red Campbell and Bob Passer, on the USS Sumner, which was a survey ship, was docked over there in Pearl Harbor, pretty close to the line of flight of the Japanese torpedo planes. They fired the shot, hit that Japanese plane, probably 25, 30 feet up here, up to our port, and about that high. And that plane, and I'm telling right here to tell you, disintegrated. It vaporized. It disappeared. And except for a propeller, a three-bladed propeller spinning off toward the IE of mud flats, and a torpedo. And the torpedo dropped straight down. Those torpedoes are 18 feet long. It submerged, it came back up to the surface, locked in on apparently the metal on our motor of our boat, because we were a wood boat. It locked in on our boat, followed us, and I knew it. Coxswain put the pedal to the metal to that, and we went in there, and I had the stern line, and Bill Morris had the bow line, and we jumped 6 to 7 feet. We ran up behind an abutment. Torpedo planes were still coming in. After we ran up behind that abutment, we kind of expected that torpedo to explode that had been following us. And nothing happened. And when all the torpedo planes come past, we could go back out and jump in our boat. And but we looked up over the edge of the abutment first and looked down there, and that torpedo came between two pilings in that dock and eased up on a little sandbar, you know how waves will wash up a little sandbar. It just eased up on that sandbar. And we jumped in our boat and busied ourselves and running back, go back to the ships. Of course, the Arizona went up at 8:05, you know. We were privileged to see all that stuff going on in the harbor, you know. See the Oklahoma's turning over, the Arizona went up like that, it came back down like that, tremendous explosion. We busied ourselves picking up survivors from the West Virginia, from the Oklahoma, Arizona. Part of our time we spent at the bottom side of Arizona, because time to time these fellows would come, sailors would force themselves through these portholes, 18-inch portholes, and here you got a guy coming up there like that. So when you face death, you can do a lot of things. These guys come up like that, come up there and just half them out of their mind. You have to slap them a little bit. We put them in a boat, and then take a boatload over to the submarine base. They have to take them to the hospital. And the same thing, we did that all day long. We spent that night, Sunday night, inboard side at 10:10. The next morning, we were commandeered by different officers to take them to their ship, like that, all over the harbor. Monday afternoon, we were told to go help the tug Hoga put out the fire on the Arizona. tug couldn't get close to the Arizona, close enough to knock the fire out, because they have a 10.5-foot draft. We have a 32-inch draft. So we got the hose from the tug and we moved up closer to the fire to knock that out. But we stayed there, and Monday afternoon, Monday night, into Tuesday morning, and into Tuesday afternoon. After the fire was out, we went back to our own ship, which was in West Virginia. I was in the 5th Division, and fortunately the 5th Division was above deck. But the water, the oily water, had seeped up between the casemates and things. So we had to wade about knee deep in water to go to my locker. The locker was burned. All the lockers were burned because the oil had seeped up in the casemate that was on fire, see. And the lock still worked. And I opened that locker up and I looked in there, and everything in that locker was burned up. I had sailing medals, rowing medals, all that. An album full of pictures of luau's and hula girls and scenery around the island, all gone. The only thing that survived was a brooch that I had bought my mother on December 6th, Saturday, to mail to her for Christmas. So I mailed that brooch to her anyway, and she kept it for all those years. Didn't find out till later that my parents had received a telegram I was missing in action, and that 3 days later that I had been found. Now, both those telegrams and that brooch that my mother returned to me after she had passed away are down in a museum in Fredericksburg to this day. I'm amazed that we didn't know any more about the oncoming attack than we did. Well, when I saw the Arizona go up in the air maybe 10, 15 feet and break down, and that huge flame of smoke, that was unlike, of course, anything I'd ever seen in my life. The West Virginia was on fire, Oklahoma was on fire, the California, it was on fire. 1,177 men lost their lives on that Arizona. Out of those 946 sailors were down inside that hull. All of them had been recovered except 229, and 229 remain there to this day. What bothers me most is not the fires and the oil, is those 900 men down in the hold of that Arizona. No chance in life.